The New Orleans Saints haven't traded back in the NFL draft since 2007. But in this year's draft, there's one unique scenario where the opportunity could absolutely be there to trade down. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering the New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode, it's Mock Draft Monday. I'm going through kind of what I would do in this year's NFL draft with one specific scenario in place. At pick 14, I've got at least two of my favorite tackles on the board. And it's going to give me an opportunity to trade back. So we're going to take a look at that, but we're not going to be patient. We're not going to sit around and wait between picks 45 and 150. We're going to get some stuff done in between there. And we're going to take our opportunity here to reunite some starting safeties here in New Orleans. But starting off, of course, with that trade back from 14. How far back do we go and who do we still land? We got all that and much more for you on today's episode. And we appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day and being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Just head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So I wanted to take a look at a scenario in which the New Orleans Saints could actually trade back. They haven't done it since the 2007 season, where I believe they did it twice, if I remember correctly. They had done it the year before that as well in 2006. And since then, we've just kind of gone, okay, well, that's just not a thing that the New Orleans Saints do. They draft LSU players once every 9 years usually, but they don't trade back at all. So we haven't seen it, and we're getting closer and closer to 20 years since the last time the New Orleans Saints have traded back. But I do believe that in this year's draft, there is one unique scenario at 14 that would allow the Saints to move back a couple of spots if they wanted to. And that's what I tried to create / recreate / predict, whatever here. And then I went through the rest of the draft kind of the way that I would draft for the New Orleans Saints. Not necessarily predictive, but wanted to give you some new names to discuss, things like that. So what I ended up doing here was when I got on the board at 14, both Taliese Fuaga, the offensive tackle out of Oregon State, and Troy Fautanu, the offensive lineman out of Washington, were both on the board at 14. So I was given an offer to trade back to 17 with the Jacksonville Jaguars and then swap one of my 5th round selections for the 96th overall selection. So it put me in a good spot there to be able to grab another player in the top 100, still be able to land probably one of those tackles. It's unlikely that two of those tackles were going to go at 14, 15, 16. So with that being the case, it allowed me to be able to step back and then say, okay, two of them are on the board. One of them will probably be there at 17. If not the end of the world. I can go defensive interior. I can go to another offensive lineman if I want to. I can go wide receiver like Brian Thomas at LSU if I wanted to. But one of those offensive linemen did make it down to 17 for me. And so I selected Troy Fautanu, the offensive lineman out of Washington. 6'3", 317 pounds. Very athletic player, 9.45 relative athletic score. Remember, relative athletic scores are a gauge or a metric that's built looking at the athletics testing from the combine over the history of different positions and in comparing the results to that, sort of typicality over the course of that time. So very, very well rounded as a prospect. And look, 6'3", 317 might not sound like the best tackle in the world just based upon his size and things like that. But he's got extremely long arms, right? He's also got really, really good footwork. He does all the things that you don't really need to move him inside if you don't want to. Now, there's a chance that you draft him at 17 in this case. And then Trevor Penning looks good and ready to go in the new system. The new system could benefit Trevor Penning. It's a run-heavy system. It's a system that wants to get offensive linemen on the move. And it's a system that wants to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly when it comes to the passing game. So the need for, holding up for 5-6 seconds of protection isn't necessarily there. So it does kind of make the passing game a little bit easier, does kind of play to his strengths in a wide zone rushing offense that will get him on the move. So there are some things there to where, look, you can make this selection at 14, 17, whatever. in Troy Fautanu and then end up still starting Trevor Penning at left tackle, but you don't lose anything here because you can move Fautanu over to right tackle if you need to in place of Ryan Ramczyk if he can't get started at the beginning of the season. And at the absolute quote unquote worst, you've got a new starting left guard. No issue with that at all. The Washington player is very, very good. And he's a type of guy that allows you to be able to change the way that you call plays. And so the fact that you can move him around all over the place, the fact that he's somebody that is hyper athletic, that is very good in the zone blocking game, has allowed just 3 sacks in the last 3 years. All of those things add up. All of them add up. He is a guy that is being seen as a potential top 10 player, not necessarily a top 10 selection because positional need and stuff like that is going to affect the BPA sort of ranking of players and things like that. But Matt Miller just put out his 18 players over at ESPN with a first round grade. Remember, not everybody that gets drafted in the first round has a first round grade. Usually only about half to 20 of those players end up with actual first round grades. Fautanu, number 16 on that list. We drafted him here at 17. So makes perfect sense. Feels like something that could absolutely happen. The only thing would be if somebody gets froggy and then leaps up for him in the top 10, then all of a sudden you kind of sit back and you go, okay, well, that's just kind of what happens there. But we can't predict that, right? In this scenario, he was there at 17, or Fuaga could have been there at 17. Fuaga ended up being off the board. I'd have been happy with either of them. But honestly, I'm starting to feel like Troy Fautanu is becoming my favorite offensive tackle outside of Olu Fashanu. Now, I know Joe Alt out of Notre Dame exists, but he's so far out of the range of where the New Orleans Saints are going to be selecting that I'm not too, that's why I don't really spend too much time talking about him, but he's clearly the number 1 tackle in this year's class. But Olu Fashanu out of Penn State's right there. And then honestly, Troy Fautanu might be 2 or 3 for me behind Fashanu. So I'm all about this. And if you can trade back, add a selection, put yourself in position to be able to add another top 100 player, or at least another top 100 selection to utilize on a player, then that's going to give me an opportunity to be able to say, okay, great, let me grab this offensive lineman. And then I have a lot of options available to me after that. I don't have to feel so married to how I use pick 45, which is also a spot where you could potentially trade back. So even if you don't like the idea of the Saints trading back in round 1, trading back from 45 could make a lot of sense if you can pick up a 50 and an 80 somewhere, right? Something in the 50 and 80 range makes a ton of sense for New Orleans. So Troy Fautanu at pick 17. Just a reminder of the trade. I sent 14 and 175 to the Jacksonville Jaguars for 17 and 96. I could have thrown in like a future 5th or a future 6th or whatever, a little bit of that extra pocket change kind of thing that the NFL always does. I didn't worry about it for this exercise, but certainly that's a way that I could have gone as well. But I still get to land one of my top offensive tackles. I still get to bolster my offensive line, and I pick up a top 100 pick. Now, how are we going to utilize that top 100 pick? That's where we get to have some fun. But before we do get to that, I want to talk about the potential of pairing up 2 starting safeties from their college days here in New Orleans and finding out if you're going to be able to profit off of that. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode, this Mock Draft Monday of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can make every moment more. You can say goodbye to all the busted brackets because FanDuel is going to let you bet on every game in the tournament, men's and women's alike. The sports calendar is absolutely loaded, and FanDuel is making it super excited to get in on all of the action because right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets by winning your first $5 bet. That's it. That's $200 that you can then use on the tournament, the MLB, the NBA, the NHL, and so much more, including NFL draft props. I'm rocking my LSU Tigers shirt today because the LSU women are taking on the Iowa Hawkeyes. The LSU right now, -1 or +1.5 underdogs. Good one to get in on. But if you like the favorite there, great place to go and put your first $5 bet down and walk away with $200 if that $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, family. Now we get the opportunity here to do something creative. We've got new draft capital that we were able to get here. We still got one of our top tackles off of the board, or top offensive lineman off the board. Now, let's have a little bit of fun and reunite some starting safeties here in New Orleans. And of course, spend our new top 100 selection. Appreciate you very much as always for making us your first listen of the day every day here on the Locked On Saints podcast. Don't forget to go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 national sports stream, the first of its kind over on YouTube. None of the shouting, none of the debate theatrics, none of the yelling, none of the people trying to talk about a thing that they have never paid attention to before 3 hours before that show was recorded or streamed live or whatever. Get everything you need from the insiders, the experts that know, the locals that know what's going on with your favorite teams over at Locked On Sports Today. All right, so as we take a look now at where I can go with pick 45, okay? Now that I have this top 100 selection, it kind of gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I can really go best player available on the board here. I don't have to really target another offensive lineman. I can if I want to. I don't have to target another wide receiver. I don't really have to do those things. I can wait until that next top 100 selection and maybe pair these two, players up in some way or something like that. That makes sense, kind of like roster building wise. So that's the route that I went here. I didn't have to go best player, didn't have to go to a certain position. So I went best player available, and the best player available was a guy that I absolutely love. And I've been looking at a way to like work his evaluation into a mock draft Monday. And we finally found a way to do it. Let's go Minnesota safety Tyler Nubin. 6'1", 205 pounds, allowed a completion percentage in 2023 of just 30%. 30%. That was the lowest of all safeties in this year's draft class that have taken at least 200 coverage snaps. During those 200 coverage snaps, he was targeted just 20 times and allowed only 6 receptions. 6. And had a 20% forcing completion rate on top of that. So even though he wasn't getting targeted a ton, when he was targeted, you were not completing passes against Tyler Nubin. And I think that one of the things that, like, when you hear about a safety and the first thing you hear about is their coverage ability, you kind of go, oh, okay, he must be a deep safety. Not necessarily. This is a guy that played 468 snaps deep last year, don't get me wrong, but he also played 198 in the box, played 171 in the box the year before that, 197 in the box the season before that as well, and has been paired up with now New Orleans Saints safety Jordan Howden in the past. Now, there's not a lot of opportunities that you get as an NFL team to pair up college teammates. We've seen it a couple of times. We've seen it with, Tua and Jaylen Waddle over in Miami. We saw it with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase over in Cincinnati. Now you get the opportunity here to pair up Jordan Howden and Tyler Nubin, at least for your future, right? Tyler Nubin could step into that role to where he's playing that blend of box safety and split safety and all those other things, kind of hold the Marcus May role. He might be able to win that role drafted this year and then get an opportunity to start right away while Jordan Howden waits behind Tyrann Mathieu until he gets the opportunity to take over the post safety, deep safety, free safety type of role. And then moving on, you've got two guys that are pioneering that are effectively shepherding the back end of your defense that have worked together for years and years and years. And so you get a lot of that familiarity to be able to put both of those guys back together, allow them to be able to play a very similar role to what they did in Minnesota. I talked to Jordan Howden early on last year, and I asked him, what are some of the things that you're doing here that are different than what you did over in Minnesota? And he's like, it's not a ton different. It's like early on in college, you're just relying on natural ability. But once you get kind of the fundamentals down and you realize what it is that you're trying to do, like with your other teammates and how to share, rotate, all these other things, the principles are the principles. And so putting both of those guys back together again here in New Orleans is like a good storyline, right? Yeah, have fun with that, Ross. And then also be like, it chemistry-wise makes a ton of sense. So I went with Tyler Nubin at 45, the safety out of Minnesota. Let's go now to pick 96. This is one of the picks that we got in that trade back with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Also sent away one of those 5th-round picks in the process. I've done this before in this area, so I'm going with another player that I've drafted before because, I want the wide receiver, and I'm going to go with Brenden Rice out of USC, 6'2", 208 pounds, 12 receiving touchdowns back in 2023, averaged over 17 yards per catch in 2023 as well. So very busy, 17.6. Just got better and better year after year after year without ever really having that like 1,000-yard season or anything like that. But even despite that, he's very good off of man coverage, very low drop rate, had only 2 drops this past season on 70 targets, which is pretty good. It's only a 4-ish% drop rate, I think. 4.3% drop rate. 2.75 yards per route run as well. this guy just gets it done. And he's polished. And here's the other thing that I'm drafting when I draft Brenden Rice. And this is, you might hate this. You might hate this. But this is one of the other ways that I look at it, just from like a team building perspective, because I'm making my picks, not predictive picks for the Saints here. But if I'm making my picks here, this is a guy that actually comes in below the RAS threshold, right? Below the relative athletic score threshold. But I don't care, because you know what I get? I get Jerry Rice around my young room of wide receivers. I get Jerry Rice around Brenden Rice. I get Jerry Rice around Chris Olave. I get Jerry Rice around A.T. Perry. I get Jerry Rice around Rashid Shaheed. And Stanley Morgan and Cedric Wilson, though those guys just have a little bit more experience. But now I get to say, okay, I came off of a year where I had, receivers getting called out for running the wrong routes. I had miscommunication between the quarterback and the wide receiver that we're still really not sure where the actual catalyst of that came from. We had, you saw a lot of these different things. And now you swapped out wide receiver coaches. You've gone from Cody Burns, who came in from the collegiate level. The Saints wanted somebody with more NFL experience. Remember, he came over from Auburn and Tennessee most recently, and did a fair job with the players for those 2 years. But the Saints wanted somebody that was going to be able to come in and do a little bit more of the tough love stuff, kind of like how Coach CJ was back in the day. And so now they bring in Coach Dub, Keith Williams. And then now you also have a guy like Jerry Rice that'll be around the facility every now and then because his son plays for the team. Yeah, I'll take that any day. Forget having John Gruden come and talk to the team. Let Jerry Rice come and talk to my team. You know what I mean? Like any day, 100%. So that's one of the other reasons why, I think, hey, Brenden Rice at 96, happy to do it. I need that X receiver anyway. He fits that mold. I need a guy that's going to be able to be a very smooth route runner that has a diverse package of releases that can deploy from all over the place. And those are all things that he can do. And I get Jerry Rice around my core of wide receivers. Thumbs up, fam. Thumbs up. Very happy about that. All right, coming up next, I'm not waiting until 150. I'm not doing it. We're too impatient for that. So we're going to trade up here for a prospect that might be able to help really reshape this defensive line. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up this Mock Draft Monday here on Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me ask you a question. How's your social battery doing? You feel like you need to recharge a little bit, or maybe you're bursting with energy. That's usually how I am. I'm usually bursting with energy. But you know what gets me there? What gets me to the point where my social battery is charged? It's being in social situations. That's not the case for everybody. A lot of people want to recharge on their own. Maybe you're not necessarily sure where you align on that spectrum, and that's where therapy can be big, because it can help you have the self-awareness to help you build a social life that doesn't constantly drain your battery. Put yourself in the situations to recharge, and then that way when you are out there in social, you are recharged and ready to go. Look, if you've been thinking about therapy, please give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Go and check them out today so you can find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Appreciate you very much for being here for another Mock Draft Monday. I felt like I was too impatient to sit around and wait from 96 all the way to 150. So we're doing a little trade up here to go up and grab a guy that I think can really, really help out the defensive line. So let's get to that as we wrap up our mock draft here on Locked On Saints. Appreciate you very much as always. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Coming up tomorrow, Charlie Smith going to be a big part of the conversation here. The New Orleans Saints generating more kicker competition. So we're going to get to that. And I'm going to explain to you why Charlie Smith was given a 3-year deal as opposed to just a 1-year deal and why it matters. We got that coming up for you on tomorrow's episode and much more, covering all the biggest stories from around your New Orleans Saints. And look, pay attention, right? It's April Fool's Day. Okay. I'm not doing any April Fools on the show. I don't do that. Banish April Fool's Day. But I'm just saying, be careful when it comes to big news around April Fool's Day. Okay. They be lying. They be lying in these streets. Okay. So I decided I didn't want to wait until pick 150. I'm too impatient. So I moved with the San Francisco 49ers 150 and 170 in order to move up to 124. If you're not familiar with it, there are draft trade values. Each pick carries a numeric value. And so if you bundle picks, it adds to that value. And then that's how you determine whether or not you can move. I use the Rich Hill trade chart. You can find that over at drafttech.com, TEK. and it's 2T. So DRAFTTEK. And so I used the Rich Hill trade chart. I was able to move 150 and 170 to get up to those two combined equaled 21 points. So it allowed me to move up to 124. I might have been able to get to 123 with the Houston Texans as well, but I didn't need to. So I just stuck with it. Got there 124 with the San Francisco 49ers, a team that the Saints have done draft trades for. Remember, San Francisco is a team that the Saints moved up with in 2017 to draft. Anybody? Alvin Kamara. So I did it again. And this time I moved up for a defensive lineman that I'm going to be able to move all over the line of scrimmage. And it's Justin Eboigbe. Sorry. Justin Eboigbe, the defensive lineman from Alabama. Line him up as a zero shade nose tackle, line him up as a 5-tech defensive end, whatever. Get it. Put him on the field. 6'4", 297 pounds. He's a big guy. You're going to be able to move him around all over the line. 11 and a half tackles for a loss last year. So you can see he gets active in the backfield. And he also had 7 sacks last year too. So don't want to rule those out. Just not necessarily his game. His game for the most part is being a run stopper and being a guy that can do that. So I feel like adding him to this defensive line and the versatility that you can get from him really kind of helps. He's kind of, for me, like a late round Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman, I'll call him, out of Missouri, who's probably going to be a first round selection. He moves up and down all over the offensive line, all over the defensive line, all that. This is kind of my later round version of that without having to get back into the first round to get up. Now, getting back into the first round to get Darius Robinson, absolute dream for me. Draft your favorite offensive tackle, trade your 45, a second and a player or something like the future second and a player or something like that to get up to, the first round for Darius Robinson. Love it. All about it. But didn't have to do that here. But I was able to move 150 and 170 to get up into that 120-ish range, 124 in this case, and then grab Justin Eboigbe, who gives me that same type of versatility, but probably just needs a little bit more development, particularly as a pass rusher, needs a little bit more development. He doesn't rely on his pass rush moves as much as you'd like to see him do it, but when he does, they are effective. And so I think just getting him around veteran players, getting him, coached up would end up having a big impact on him. All right, we're going to go to a couple of familiar names here. So now we're sitting here after trading away a couple of these, these round 5 selections. We're sitting at pick 168 here in the 5th round. So this is now the only selection we're going to make in the 5th round. And so we're going Tyrone Tracy. The running back / wide receiver out of Purdue, was full-time running back with Purdue, was full-time wide receiver with Iowa before he transferred. 5'11", 209 pounds, 9.77 relative athletic score. So very, very athletic. You look at his stats, 2,148 total yards from scrimmage throughout his career, 15 scrimmage touchdowns, 8.3 yards per touch as well. So that includes all the runs, that includes the reverses, that includes the jet sweeps, that includes the, all the different, the receptions. It includes every single thing that he did from scrimmage. So that doesn't include kick returns and stuff like that, but 8.3 yards per touch. Yeah, give me that. Just one of those guys that I feel like fits really well in what the New Orleans Saints are going to want from this new system. I think there should be a little bit of a positionlessness to this team. And with guys like, Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara and potentially Kendre Miller could be in that conversation as well, that adding more of these positionless players, you can kind of move around in a bunch of different places, deploy a bunch of different ways, all that. It's one of the reasons why I think that Jaheim Bell would be a good fit as well, tight end out of Florida State. I think you want that positionlessness. Gives you the opportunity to get someone in a Deebo Samuel-like role, not Deebo Samuel levels of production, not Deebo Samuel levels of skill, not Deebo Samuel levels of talent. Those things are not a given, but just simply the move them around kind of guy that you can move all over the place. Tyrone Tracy would sell that and would work really well because you can actually turn around and hand the ball off to him. So I like a Tyrone Tracy in the 5th round. All right, let's get to 6th round. We got 2 selections here, 190 and 199. Another familiar name here, Jaylen Harrell. I wanted to get another defensive end, another edge rusher, 6'3", 250 pounds, 6.5 sacks last year for Michigan, including being just the absolute hero of the Michigan Ohio State game, where he didn't even get a sack, but he got a pressure up the middle. He kind of, came off the edge, stunted back inside, got right up the middle into the face of the quarterback, and it led to an interception that sealed the game for Michigan. That's the type of disruptive player that you want. 250 pounds is a little bit undersized, right? Like, I think you want to bulk him up a little bit and get him up to 260, 270 range if he can carry it and all that. I think that's what the Saints would want to do. But I think that Jaylen Harrell is just one of those guys that's just going kind of under the radar, and that could be a really good asset for a team late in a draft to help bolster their pass rush. Pick 199. Let's go to a local guy. We're not going to go LSU here. We're not going to get crazy, but we're going Louisiana. Let's go Louisiana Raging Cajuns offensive lineman Nathan Thomas, 6'5", 332 pounds. He spent most of his time, or if not all of his time, operating at left tackle with the Raging Cajuns there. But we were talking about like the relative athletic score and stuff like that. One of the things that's really nice about the model is that you can move based on position. You can say, okay, what's the RAS at guard? And this is probably what's going to end up happening with Nathan Thomas, is that he'll be kicked inside. 8.86, very athletic for the position. His biggest thing is that he's a very good run blocker, not the strongest pass blocker. You stop me if you've heard it before. So putting him inside right away, making the decision with a 6th-round selection to move him inside at guard would probably benefit him and benefit the Saints. So that's what I'm looking for right there with a Nathan Thomas selection. But I can appreciate and know, okay, he's got the ability, the experience to play outside as well, should I ever need it. And then to wrap it up at pick 239 in the 7th round, let's go Jared Wiley, the tight end out of TCU, kind of flying under the radar. 4.62 40-yard dash, so really good speed at 6'6", 249 pounds. He can bulk up a little bit, nothing wrong with that. But 9.71 RAS, just a really athletic player to add to your tight end room, and then see what you're able to do with him. He's not a guy that has to come in and immediately have a role. He's not a guy that has to come in and immediately solve any big problems. He's a dude that comes in, fits into the room, and goes, okay, where do I contribute? How do I try to make this roster? And that's a really, really good spot for him. Really, really good spot for the New Orleans Saints at the position as well. So here you go. We addressed the offensive line. Even with a trade back, we got Tyler Nubin and Jordan Howden paired back up. We added Brenden Rice as the X receiver. We got Justin Avoigbe, who can move all around the defensive line. Some positionless guys like Tyrone Tracy and Nathan Thomas. You can move around Jaylen Harrell to help to bolster that pass rush, and then Jared Wiley late to add to the tight end room and get yourself another big body dude to be a pass catcher for you. Yeah, there you go. Not bad. Didn't add a cornerback, didn't add a linebacker. So maybe those are spots where you look at undrafted free agency. Maybe those are spots you look and you go, Ross, big miss there. Totally fine. But those are positions you might be able to take a look at in undrafted free agency as well, especially because you're not addressing those positions early in this year's draft, more than likely, unless Peyton Wilson was that best player at 45. But with Tyler Nubin on the board, that was an easy decision for me. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much for joining us for another episode of Locked On Saints and making us your first listen of the day every day. Locked on LSU, Locked on Pelicans need to be your next listen today. So much going on with both of them, and especially, of course, with the LSU ladies on the way to their big game against Iowa. You're going to want to go and check out Caroline Fenton for sure at Locked on LSU. We appreciate you very much as always for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.